Welcome to Chaos2Cured podcast. You're here with your host, Jeffrey Fried and Kirk Patrick Miller. Today, we are going to talk about loneliness and isolation. It's a big issue with people dealing with mental health. And it's definitely a topic that leads in a lot of different directions. So Jeffrey, I know we never plan these and I always throw you on the fire. So give me a couple minute summary of some of the things that you've seen, again, how this world is shaping it to, kind of force us to maybe feel a little bit more isolated. And then we'll get into some of the things we've seen and how to fix it. So jump in.
I will. Loneliness is pandemic, and it was exacerbated by the pandemic. But with people on the spectrum and people with challenges, mental health challenges, it is a killer. It's an attraction aversion thing because virtually all, there are people on the spectrum, for example, who don't need hardly any social interaction because they live totally inside their own heads. Not that that's a wonderfully healthy way to be, but that's the way they are. So this isn't meant so much for them as for people who have this attraction aversion thing towards people. They want socialization, but they question everything that they say. They're so used to being ostracized or treated like they're either dumb or crazy, or they interpret it that way, and they hate that feeling. They go out with a social group and they say the wrong stuff at the wrong time. Everybody laughs and they're not laughing. They laugh and nobody else is laughing, and it's tends to get embarrassing. And then they go home and they think, God, why did I even go out? They're not risk takers either. Social rejection is devastating. It's very hard on everybody. But again, we're talking about people who have intense, exaggerated senses. At the risk of being very, very repetitive and redundant, I can't say that enough. The most important thing you'll hear from me is about this topic is that people on the spectrum and people who have spectrum-like conditions have exaggerated intense senses. They all do. It's closed sensitivity to light, sensitivity to taste, touch. It doesn't have to be all of them, but if it's a significant number, it tells you a lot of things. Social rejection, especially for teenagers, is brutal, whether or not you have any differential way of processing the world. It's really hard. But there's such a high risk for people that are highly sensitive to go out with a group of people. Their timing is different. They're tense. They're nervous. They say the wrong thing. They don't they don't pick up the same social cues that other people do. They tend to pick up too many and don't know which ones to react to. So it's something that is very, very prominent. And it ain't going away because it is very possible to have the illusion that you have a lot of friends if they're online. Now, online is actually really good for people on the spectrum. It allows them to communicate without having to read people's faces or to listen to the nuances of what they're saying. And sense of humor is more obvious. If you're making a joke online, it gives you more time to consider it and process it. And you don't have to deal with your face being in the wrong place or laughing inappropriately. So it's very alluring because remember, virtually everybody needs social interaction. And these people are not different that way. They tend to really want acceptance and socialization. They intuitively want it. And when they do it, it's a terrible experience so often. And when it's a terrible experience, they're afraid of it. And if you're afraid of it, the only way you can get it is online. It's safer. Not really, but they think it's safer. So I don't know how it's going to get better until somebody first defines it, which I hope I just did. and make some suggestions that will work in harmony with the way these people think and process the world.
It's, I don't think you can say what you did too often. I think it's really important, and I liked when you said spectrum like, issues. It's so many of these things are interconnected, and the intensity by which you were talking about wanting self-acceptance, and this is key for anyone listening, because these exaggerated reactions, if they're at, I can give a couple good examples, where someone's at, say, a party, and there is a social interaction that is maybe misread, and then there's a complete meltdown that seems out of
Proportion.
character. Yes, exactly, perfect word. So it's way off the top, it's way over the top, whatever you want to call it, and it seems uncharacteristic, or it doesn't measure up. The part of that is the individual's trying so hard. When they misread that cue, it's not a single failure, it's like their whole life just crumbled. And that's
Right.
what that feeling of more. I had the same things with bipolar, but what would happen is, instead of it being crumbling down on my self-esteem, which it would, and lead to depression, a lot of times instead it would be reflective. So I'd get angry about it. So there would be a lashing out, and aggression. So I do want to say that, parents, if you're seeing this, whether it's really massive amounts of anger or frustration and sadness, those are kind of keys, or key markings that they're really trying super hard, and there's something they care about with immense amounts of, I don't even know how to state it correctly.
Immense amount of it. They put their whole heart into it.
Perfect. And that is something I don't think people realize. So when you say, I need to keep saying this, they feel it more. So
Yeah.
the social rejection, they feel more. When we were talking about what the world has kind of shaped into, we have social media. I think when we talk about words being able to be harm people, and there's a lot of people that say, oh, people are too soft and whatever, or the thing is that for me personally, again, I took things to heart way too often, and of course my own expectations were massively high. So I'm already trying to please the whole world, plus myself and my own unrealistic expectations, which, again, you mentioned, like, you set yourself up almost for failure. So socializing and going out, you have this vision, especially with Instagram, Facebook. You watch movies of people throwing a party, and the house is never damaged, and everybody's dancing and having a good time. No one's throwing up, and I watch these shows, and we see Instagram, we see all this stuff that is staged. It's not real life. It's staged life. And it immediately, for me, makes me feel like a failure. I mean, a lot of times lonely or unsuccessful. And then you start getting into the whole thing of, well, I'm like this, and I've been labeled as this and this and this, and no one wants that. And then it's a kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. And then the more desperate you are to meet someone. So anyone that is listening to this and is struggling with socialization, and they really badly want friends, the more desperately you want them, the less likely they are to come around. It's just, people can sense that desperation. Yeah.
Let me throw this in too. To make this more understandable, it's like for a kid, school is their job and socialization is their job. That's the same thing as when you go to work. It's very important to you how that day goes. There's a lot of people, it's their whole life. Um, and to a highly sensitive kid, they go to school, they want to be really, really good. They want to be at the top of the class. They want to have friends, and they get tense and anxious. And then, as you said, the probability of failure goes way up. These people are not people who do well under social pressure. They're not quick with their responses. And in this culture, we love witty, quick responses, witty repartee. And these are not folks that are normally good at that. And if they try to be, the wrong stuff comes out. They need time to consider, to process what they're about to say. And there's a lot of pressure socially to be quick and say something clever. They're not that good at it. They can get good at it, but it's real. Most of them don't. So what ends up happening is you start to dread social situations, and God knows you don't need that. Life's hard enough. So you stay away from them. And to convince yourself that you are social, you do it through the internet because it's safer. And that's the allure of the internet. And then what you said was huge when you commented on, they call it like Facebook envy. People get on there and they talk about how wonderful their life is, which is mostly not true. And these folks take it and think, God, what a loser I am. I'm not visiting Italy this weekend or flying on the Concorde, if that even exists. Or flying first class on Emirates with 16 of my greatest friends. I don't even have a friend. They don't even like me. I'm never invited to parties and social engagements. What a loser I am. And boy, there's a lot of that going around. It's unrealistic expectations. And everybody knows what that feels like, to feel left out. And these folks feel it again to the 10th power. It's for what to you might be an uncomfortable experience but in a day you forget about it. These people take it and nurse it, and it can become a phobia.
Oh, that's the nursing it is key for individuals to understand. So if you are on the spectrum or you have any mental health issue that has some, this is very common. Loneliness is common without a mental health difference. So if you're a neurotypical mind or thinker, you're still going to face loneliness. And all of these, so this show kind of covers everything, but I think one of the things that you mentioned, where the speed at which we're supposed to communicate back and forth. And this is one thing that I and you can tell me what you think on this. I feel that the individuals on the spectrum that I work with, or let's say they, oftentimes I feel they are too good at communicating. And the problem is that, let's say somebody insults them, their first instinct, at least this is kind of how I was with, my bipolar OCD. I don't know how those tie in, but I would want to slice and really harm.
Yep.
Right. And again, so the intent was so harsh and I was good. I knew what to say, what would hurt them the most. Now, I know parents out there probably know when their child looks at them and they just rip your heart out. That's what I was trying to do. Now, what happens is I learned that I can't do that with everybody because you start harming everyone. And so then so you all of a sudden, then you have to filter. So not only are you trying to respond, but then you're filtering your natural response. And then you're trying to find what is a socially acceptable response. And then you have to run it through a secondary filter because you have to go, is this even socially, doable? Can I get away with this? So it's like more filters to go through before they can react. And that pressure, like you said, when the reaction comes, it does not go well. It's not received well. And so much of this comes down to time, taking the time. We keep bringing up, and again, you're going to hammer home how people like this with non-neurotypical minds, feel things more, I'm going to focus on time. You mentioned light earlier, and this is not off topic, but because it has to do with understanding ourselves. That's one way to fight loneliness, is to really know who we are, because then you know what to look for, what kind of friends fulfill you. And then again, it's quality, not quantity, for just about everything in life. But there was a study done with light, and low level light extends the amount of time people feel. So they feel like, I should say, I'm trying to say it correctly, they feel like time lasts longer with dim light. This was done in a journal of psychology. I'm trying to remember which one.
Nope.
And
Yeah.
really cool study. But they also found that so high light, like really bright light, makes the time go by faster. Now, if you think of our earlier discussions about CFF, so critical flicker fusion frequency, and its perception of time, you tie in light, and we've talked about how especially individuals on the spectrum, feel things more. It's interesting that light sensitivity is very common I have it. And I do notice, what is the setting in every office building? Bright, white, fluorescent lights.
Which they can hear.
Oh, yeah. So not only can you hear, which is annoying because it's this little hum and it's never the right pitch. And by the way, the most frustrating thing is seeing all these lights on the top of the ceiling and none of them match. So they're all out of tune. It's like this, piano that's been like dropped off a roof. So it's frustrating. So the lighting, and again, the reason why I brought that off, that tangent, is knowing that I kind of like dimmer light. The people I want to be around, if they like places that are loud, bright, explosive, it's hard on me. So the thing is knowing who I am, it doesn't negate my ability to go be friends with those types of people. It just changes, like, again, what activities, what date. I kind of formulate my days based around, again, I'm trying to understand how I'm built, and I'm very good socially, but I don't like to be social. So
having to filter all the time is so exhausting. And most of these folks all of them that I work with, say that they can enjoy social situations, but they have to sleep 3 hours longer, and they can't do it 2 or 3 nights in a row. It's exhausting. And they're introverts. And for an extrovert and neurotypical person, there's no anxiety at all. They actually gain energy from being around people. The more people, the more social they are, the better, the happier they are, the more energy infused they are. The opposite for people that are highly sensitive. It is exhausting. And so being lonely is a consequence, or can be a consequence, of avoiding loud, cacophonous places. And therefore, most of your potential friends might want to do that. You're not going to join in. And it's very easy to become isolated. It's safe. There's a lot of entertainment. Your phone is a entertainment center. There's a million channels on TV. There's great books. There's games. You can go a long time without having any social interaction nowadays and be just fine. But what you're worried about, if you are someone on a spectrum, or again with spectrum-like issues, is you think you're not normal. All your life, you notice that other people are smoother in public than you are, and they just sort of say the right thing. So the kid I worked with tonight says he goes to bed every night praying, God, please let me be normal. Please let me be normal. That's all I want. And that's really interesting because he verbalized it. Most don't. It's the most important thing for young kids and for teenagers, is to be normal, not to be weird, because that makes them the object of ridicule. And social ridicule and social disgrace is one of their biggest fears. And being exposed in public is one of their biggest fears. So when you add that into the equation, that they're more likely than most people to do faux pas, make things that say things that are out of place, you've got a deadly combination. So many of them, because it's so easy to entertain yourself without people, maybe even it's preferable to some people than to be with people. You do it, and it's easy to do it nowadays.
You know, there's a few things that I just want to hop to, before we kind of talk about some ways that people can, we're tying that in ways to help. One thing is when we were talking about social media, I'm just going to make up a term. We kind of have an importance inversion. We feel things are like certain things are really important. You see posts, people traveling. You see, like, I feel everything is again built up for an audience. So people that are introverts don't necessarily want a proposal with everybody dancing in the street. But what do we see on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or the TikTok, whatever, all of the social media, everywhere you look, it's big, explosive baby reveals, prom proposals, engagement. I mean, everything is I don't know, $5 million movie. It's just ridiculous. It's all set up. And so people aren't, and this hops back into our time thing too. People aren't living life. They are documenting life. And that, I wish I could claim that quote for my own. That was one of my friends who's paralyzed on half his body. And he's losing more. But he said that, and I thought that was one of the most perfectly stated and profoundly stated saying. So he said, people don't live life anymore. They just document it. They stick up their phone. And like you mentioned, the phone does have an allure. It's very comforting. So it pulls us in. And so we think all these things are important. We try to do all these things. They don't necessarily fit us as an individual. And so we then get our confidence chopped down again. And this is this is happening to everyone. And I think the key, I'll start with one of the things that is absolutely essential to overcoming loneliness. And that is truly being happy with yourself. If you don't love yourself, if you are not, well, and that's one of the things that's so hard. We think
does. Yeah. It's almost.
What are some ways? I mean, like we were just talking social media, we feel like we have to live up to all of these expectations. We feel like if we're a friend, we need to do all of these things. We need to do, I mean, there's pressure on even social events, which is the whole purpose of a social event is really you getting together with a friend. You don't need alcohol. You don't need food. You shouldn't need a movie, a phone, anything. Just literally sitting down and conversing, talking about what the stars mean, what fate means. I don't know. That is something it's a lost art form. And so the thing with loneliness that I do want to reach out on, because you've mentioned it before in the show, enemy. We're losing that feeling of community, and there are so many options. And this is really difficult. It's kind of like Netflix. When I used to go to Blockbusters, it was way easier to pick out a movie. I could go and there were fewer options. There wasn't like billions. And some of the typically a lot of the popular movies were already gone. So you walk through and, there were like maybe 8 or 20. I don't know. I mean, they got bigger. But when they originally came out, I think everybody, if you're young and you've never been to one of them, they would have the actual VCR case sitting out. So there's less, there just wasn't room. So there were less options. I feel the same thing is happening with dating, and what everybody's doing is they're not making decisions because there's endless options. And so no one knows what they're looking for. So everyone is confused on what they want. They know, everybody doesn't know themselves. People aren't appreciating who they are. Like you said, people are trying to live normally. All of these things are ingredients for division between people, not inclusion. So, for me, you of course have to learn to love yourself. I'm trying to think of what would be some suggestions that you would give to people that are just truly feeling lonely and that need to see some hope, because it's hard to be in that place. What are some things that you would say, or things that you have?
Yeah, what I've done. Well, interestingly enough, one of the cures is social media, because you can find groups and a mutual interest. I've had several kids I've worked with who are very lonely, and they start playing games. They love games. Well, make a play date where the kid gets with another kid in person and they play a game, but they have to interact. That's the way into the system. They're playing the game. They're engaged in something that say there's two of them, two boys. They're getting into the game. They're enjoying it, and they're interacting, and they're making fun with each other. That's the way into the system. What a lot of adults are doing is different. What they do is they find groups, like groups of adults with autism, who meet for dinner every third Sunday or something, or who play volleyball together. So in other words, you're hanging out with groups where you already have an in. You have to have an in, and then you share it with somebody. I don't care what your instrument is, whether you're on on social media or not, but you locate people, you get together, usually with one or two, usually just one other person, and you do your games together, or you do your Legos together. And that's the way that you start to get positive associations with socialization and being with other people. But it can't be the central focus. The central focus is like when you're building a Lego, or your central focus is beating the game, and you're having fun with a friend, and then you start thinking, God, that was great. Let's have them over my house next time. That's the way you introduce it. And you also teach them the framework of making small talk, because most of them don't like making small talk, and explain the reason behind small talk. It's the way people sort of decide whether they have anything in common with the other person, trying to get a feel for where they're coming from, what they're like. So it has reasons, it has purpose, and teach them, the standard, responses to small talk. And at that point, they're always probably going to be shy. But shyness has nothing to do with, I'm trying to say here, shyness is not crippling. What's crippling is a phobia where you really don't, this is very common, where you are afraid to leave your house, or you're afraid to leave your city, because you don't know what's going to come, and it could be devastating to yourself, not your physical self as much as your psychological self. So you have to introduce it carefully. And, play dates with a theme is the answer for most people, and not just for kids either, for adults. These groups of people who get together, well, people on the spectrum, they have a lot of fun, and the pressure's off because everyone is sort of like them. And so what happens is you start to get the experience or the association of people and you, and it's pleasant. And that'll keep you from being a hermit, or at least decrease the odds that you will be a hermit.
I like that, and for one, for myself, and what I had to also learn is, you kind of said it, the socialization, and you were kind of talking about it from a different angle, so I'm going to hit it slightly differently. But when you talked about the center of attention, the focus, a lot of times when it comes to wanting a friend, needing a friend, the desire for socialization goes super high. Even if someone is an introvert, they need it so badly. When that does happen, and it can become slightly obsession like. And what I try to advise, and I practice myself, is to make sure that you're there for the right reasons. Find people that, like you had mentioned, I love the throwing in like Legos or a common interest, so that it's circled around something else other than just the two people getting along. And if it's parents and you're dealing with this in a secondary family, or trying to intermingle with other children, don't force. I loved what you mentioned. The theme is very helpful. Movie, think about the individuals. If they're really not super talkative, and they're look at a movie, look at maybe going and playing billiards, where a couple people can talk and somebody can just kind of focus. There's different activities that you can match to help the odds of what Jeffrey was just stating. Make sure it's successful. Building up we've talked about neuroplasticity before, being able to change how we think, how we process. Those things are powerful tools we can utilize. But if it's not attached with success, it just hits the self-confidence, and we have a snowball that's getting bigger as it goes downhill. So, those would be my thoughts. Again, I think self-love and understanding it's okay to go to a restaurant all by yourself. Sit and read a book. You don't need somebody. You don't need a device on. It's not easy. Just start learning. It's okay to just exist and be happy. That's something no one, really talked about to me from that just a philosophical standpoint. It's what I really believe now, is time and happiness, and all of those things that we talk about are so vital. For people that are out there and are feeling lonely or feeling really isolated, please do not give up. That's the most important thing. For anybody really lonely or struggling, there's a suicide hotline, which is 1-800-273-TALK. I think that's 1-800-273-8255, I believe. But so reach out if you're feeling really dark. And my personal struggles that led me to feeling that kind of loneliness and darkness. Sometimes loneliness has nothing to do with friends. And I did want to mention this as we were kind of going out, and I wanted to get your thoughts on that. A lot of people that I've worked with and how I felt personally, a lot of times you can have all these people around, you can have the success, you can have popularity, and you can feel utterly alone.
Existentially alone. Yeah. I've had people, friends that have come from New York, and who are on the spectrum. How can you handle it? I say to them, it's so loud and noisy and unpredictable. And they go, yeah, but it's easy to be alone there. Much easier. And there's something about the contrast that
Wow.
invites aloneness. People who are reclusive either thrive in big cities, or not like small town, big cities where nobody knows your name and you can hide, and be considered. Nobody even looks at you twice. Small towns are worse because everybody knows everybody. And then there's the isolation mode where you live by yourself and you rarely go out. It's easy to do that nowadays too. You can DoorDash everything and you never have to go out if you're play it that way. So it's very, very easy. It's very tempting, but the bottom line is that people are, unfortunately or fortunately, social beings, or we're pack animals, and we get strength from other people and other groups. Very few people, some can live totally alone, but most people can't handle it. It's the most cruelest punishment in prisons, they found, is even a day of solitary confinement. A week of it will make some people nuts. So that's the most inhumane possible punishment I can think of, or they can think of, people who are in prisons, and that's why they use it. So it's the main thing to remember is it doesn't really matter how you get introduced. I mean, if it's over a video game or it's over, some Marvel comic, it doesn't matter, but at least try to get into social situations that don't end up horribly, and get the association in your kid that, or even an adult or a teenager, that socialization is not agony. That's what you really have to get in there, because we pretty much all want it, or most of us want it, and you got to make it doable. You got to make everything doable. So those tips that we talked about should help.
I absolutely agree. And, again, no matter what, if you're feeling lonely, I've been there myself, and I think everyone has been there at some point in time. A lot of times, if you're dealing with mental health issues and you have labels and stigmas and all sorts of other things you're dealing with, it can feel overwhelming. Once you embrace what you really have and you feel proud of all of the things you've overcome, journaling is a good way to just remind yourself of all of the good things you have done. Staying positive does help. People want to be around positive people. You don't want to be fake positive, or what they call toxic positivity. I'm not trying to say be fake. What I'm saying is try to find the good in what you are, and it will help. And Jeffrey, you stated it eloquently. We do need it. And whether I found definitely video games. I love that you mentioned that. Social media, if you're there, you can just use a hashtag and type in ADHD, and you'll find comments on like Twitter, Instagram. So use hashtags if you need to find groups and people that will understand you, and then utilize it. It's very important. There's going to be groups in an app called Good Self. Something I would suggest people take a look at. That's something. There's other places that are going to be available, and thank goodness we have the technology now. So look for some people, reach out. And even for myself, I have a hard time. So it's important for me to be uncomfortable and go be social. No matter what, it really is good. So find the people that you really vibe with, or connect with, and do try, like you said earlier in the show, Jeffrey, it doesn't take all the time. I hopefully some of the tips we've mentioned will bring, I absolutely think it will help. But I do feel, make sure you believe in yourself, keep working on yourself. If you're feeling dark, please go seek some help.
Okay, let me throw one thing in to sort of finish. My main thing is I want to demystify this stuff. I want to get it out in the open. If you talk about what causes it, what some possible things will alleviate or make things better, you are getting it out in the open. Everything is much darker in the dark. You need to know what you're dealing with. It's not that horrible. And just by realizing that there's so many other people out there with these issues, that you have companions, you're not alone. That's what they don't want to feel, that they are totally existentially alone in the universe. And anything that'll alleviate that fear, ameliorate that fear, will help.
Perfectly said. We'll end on that. I can't add to it. So everyone, thank you so much for listening. please like, follow, subscribe, that kind of stuff, and share with people that you think this might help. This was a very important topic. We have some other ones as well, and now I'm getting some great feedback. So we will be, continuing with this kind of format. And then tune in for our little quick tips. We'll be publishing those as well. Have a phenomenal day. Thanks for listening, Jeffrey. Thank you. Have an amazing evening.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to Chaos2Cured podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please share it with everyone you know. And definitely like, follow, and subscribe. Certainly leave a comment if you'd like. Let us know what you'd like us to talk about the next time. Also, in our show notes, there should be direct links where you can follow us on our social media, as well as reach out to us directly. Thanks again, and have a great day. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on Chaos2Cured podcast are the speaker's own. All discussion is based on our own experiences. We do not and cannot guarantee the accuracy or completeness of any information. Chaos2Cured podcast cannot give medical or health advice. All discussion is based upon our personal experiences and meant for general and educational purposes. This podcast is not a substitute for professional help or for diagnostic purposes for yourself or another. Chaos2Cured podcast always encourages you to consult an appropriate professional.